My name is Matthew Pillmore, and I'm the president of VIP. It's my great pleasure to show you some of the most extraordinary financial strategies that you may ever learn. The following strategies are extremely effective, completely legal, and available for anyone to use. Please keep in mind, if used incorrectly for your personal circumstances, these techniques can also cause you years of harm. To apply these and other techniques safely, make sure you watch the complete video training series number 1, and then get on our calendar for your free one-on-one coaching session where an expert can help you make a plan and get you on track towards greater financial independence. Now, this is one of the most exciting video tutorials of training series number 1 because in this example, we're going to watch how Dan and Megan Albright, the case study that we've been reviewing in each video, put a plan together to successfully eliminate their $290,000 mortgage, avoid over 250 mortgage payments, and save more than $210,000 in interest costs on this one property alone. And they want to do this on multiple investment properties. So let's begin. In the tutorial called Killing Non-Mortgage Debt Fast, we demonstrated how Dan and Megan eliminated all 3 of their credit card balances and their 2 auto loans, totaling almost $50,000. And it increased their cash flow to over $2,000 on average each month. They accomplished this by using a specific set of techniques because it fit their specific needs and goals. In their example, those techniques were called lump sum payments, paycheck parking, and cash flow stacking. And we'll be using those same techniques again in this video. For you to embrace these techniques, you're going to need to first accept the fact that much of what you think you know about banks and interest rates may be completely inaccurate. Have you ever noticed how banks are continually changing their rules by adding fees, charging for services in order to increase profits? That's because all banks are in business to make money, and that money comes from you, their clients. Therefore, the rules that they create are by nature of the relationship primarily one-sided in favor of them, the bank. This has led you, the consumer, to perceive certain things like high interest rates are bad and low interest rates are good, when in truth, the only number that matters is the total interest cost. For example, most people would rather pay 4% APR on a $100,000 loan than 18%, and rightfully so. But if the 18% APR loan was paid back in 10 months and the 4% loan took 360 months to pay back, I'm willing to bet that you'd now change your mind and prefer the 18% loan. The fact is, you don't really care that much about interest rates themselves. You've just been told that you should. You should actually care more about the total interest cost, the total amount that you'll end up paying over the term of the loan, not the interest rate itself. It's the total volume of interest that matters. That's why leverage can be both powerful and also very dangerous. Leverage can be just as great in the short term, if not better, than you perceive it to be in the long term. But the banks don't want you to know that. In our example, the total amount of interest that Dan and Megan would pay if they follow their loan to full 30 years is over $283,000 in interest. This means that the total cost to own their property, if they take 30 years to pay it off, is over $500,000. That's the $290,000 in principal plus the $283,000 in interest. So it's actually closer to $575,000. That's scary, right? Now, fortunately, there are a number of ways to pay your bills and your mortgages in order to avoid as much as 80% of this unwanted interest. Regardless of the strategies that are best suited for you, we must all agree first that the only way to get these types of results is to remain disciplined to a better plan than the one that you agreed to when you signed your loan closing paperwork. So at this point, the Albrights have eliminated their non-mortgage debt, and they're now focused on eliminating their mortgage payment and avoiding as much unnecessary interest that they can. In order to avoid this extra interest and expedite the results of their mortgage reduction plan, they focused on leveraging 2 different debt weapons. And during the course of VIP's first 3 years of knowing Megan and Dan, they had acquired over $78,500 in total various debt weapons. One debt weapon was a $25,000 unsecured personal line of credit, which they learned, and you'll now learn, to use in a totally new way. Need help understanding the concept of debt weapons? Please check out the VIP Debt Weapons video tutorial to understand the basic fundamentals. The key to debt weapons is knowing which one to get, where and when to get them, and then what you do with it once you have it. Dan and Megan's combined monthly household take-home income was approximately $5,950. and their mortgage payment combined with their living expenses totaled about $3,925 per month on average. With these two numbers, we can easily calculate their cash flow by simply taking their income and subtracting their expenses. In this example, Megan and Dan's cash flow was about $2,025 on average every month. Calculating your cash flow every month is important because it's the first step to turning the banks upside down on themselves and to effectively now understand how cash flow is used in conjunction with each debt weapon. Once we've calculated cash flow, it's then time to calculate the MLS, or the maximum lump sum. The MLS is the maximum amount that you can safely and comfortably borrow from each debt weapon. To calculate your MLS, just simply multiply your cash flow by 10 months. For Dan and Megan, this totaled about $20,250. It's very important to note that credit scores are easily impacted when debt weapons are used improperly. So knowing the correct actual lump sum, or ALS, to apply from a specific debt weapon based on your unique circumstances is critical if you want to avoid harming your credit scores. ALSs can vary significantly from person to person as well as from the MLS. So check out the credit scoring video tutorial to learn how credit applies to these calculations, and then make sure you get your free one-on-one coaching session with an expert before making any lump sum payments. In the case of Dan and Megan, we determined their ideal ALS to be about $20,000. The first step they took after they had their ALS was to apply this lump sum amount of $20,000 towards their mortgage. Now this counted as the current month's mortgage payment, and it also reduced their mortgage balance to about $270,000. However, you'll immediately notice that this also creates a new $20,000 balance on their debt weapon, which they now need to pay off. Because we calculated their MLS and ALS using a 10 times multiple, we can expect that once they implement paycheck parking, the Albrights will pay off their $20,000 debt weapon balance in approximately 10 months to 1 year. Now I know what you're thinking. You're wondering, tell me what happens to the payment and interest costs associated with this new debt weapon balance, right? First, Dan and Megan will be leveraging the paycheck parking technique every month, which will count as their monthly debt weapon payment. This also works if you're self-employed because we use averages. And because they park their income against this debt weapon each month, they're paying an average of $5,950 towards this balance of this debt every month. This simple strategy begins to compress the balance of the debt weapon for an average of 20 to 28 days every month, reducing the amount of interest that the bank is able to compound daily. Plus, it puts each of their dollars to work for them nearly every day of the year. So Dan and Megan are no longer allowing their money to sit unemployed, so to speak, in their checking or savings account, where they earn almost nothing from the banks. Instead, they're effectively earning the same rate of interest, which they are preventing by parking the income until it's needed. When funds are needed to cover the monthly mortgage and the other expenses, they again leverage the debt weapons for the needed funds. They're just treating their debt weapon like they would their checking account. Now, there are several other strategies that might suit your current financial situation better, so please make sure you watch all the video tutorials and then replay the sections until the concepts are understood. I'm now going to continue to run through our example and show you how these two techniques helped Dan and Megan save hundreds of thousands of dollars in interest. After Dan and Megan paycheck parked $5,950 towards their debt weapon balance at the end of month one, they again leveraged the debt weapon to pay their $2,325 worth of living expenses, which increases the balance of the debt weapon, and it brings the total new balance to about $16,375. In the second month, Dan and Megan just repeat this process. They paycheck park, dropping the balance to about $10,425, and further reduces the total interest costs that they'll incur. And then at the end of month two, they now have another mortgage payment and the $2,325 in living expenses. So by the end, they now have a new balance of about $14,350. We've now entered what we call full cycle, which means that every month from this point forward, until this balance is paid back, Megan and Dan will paycheck park $5,950 on average into their debt weapon and pay a total of $3,925 in expenses. Therefore, every month that passes, the total balance on their debt weapon reduces by about $2,025, which is their cash flow each month. It just stays in the account. And from this point forward, it's very easy to do the math. We just take the current $14,350 remaining balance on this debt weapon and we divide it by the $2,025 of average cash flow to calculate the total number of months it's going to take Dan and Megan to completely pay off their debt weapon. The total here will be about 7.1 months, and after accounting for the 2 months that we already paid, the total ends up at about 9.1. Let's now factor in the interest that's been accumulating on the balance throughout this term. For this example, let's use a relatively high interest rate of 18%. Most debt weapons are between 7 to 10%, but I want to be very conservative, and I'm going to convert this into an $1,823 full-term dollar amount. With our strategy of paycheck parking, we pay debt back very quickly, which means that even with a high interest rate, there's not much interest cost associated with the debt. Compared to the interest costs on the same $20,000 at 5.2% mortgage APR over the full mortgage term. From this point forward, we know that implementing this strategy, Dan and Megan's mortgage debt can be reduced by $20,000 every 10 months at a total interest cost of $1,823 each time. Imagine if you had more cash flow than this. Remember, they started with about $400 in cash flow, and you'll see that in the other video tutorials. For many people, it's hard to comprehend the power of what's happening. So let's use VIP's Cashflow Cruncher spreadsheet and take one closer look at the mathematical impact of this strategy over the entire term of their loan. For this example, we'll be using the Cashflow Cruncher loan calculator page. To learn more about all the pages in the Cashflow Cruncher tool, please see our Cashflow Cruncher video tutorial. And if you're interested in using our Cashflow Cruncher tool as part of our continued effort to improve our videos and as a thank you to our visitors, we've made the Cashflow Cruncher available completely free to all VIP site visitors who submit their feedback after viewing training series number 1. Starting with a loan balance here of the $290,000 with their interest rate of 5.2%, spread out over 360 months or 30 years, you can see that total interest cost of $283,000 here. Let's go down to payment number 1 and see what happens when Megan and Dan leverage that $20,000 lump sum payment from their debt weapon. Now, for some, this might be difficult to see, but what I want you to do is pay close attention up here to the total number of payments saved, the number of years saved, and the dollar amount of payments saved. You can immediately see that with just one lump sum payment and one simple technique, Dan and Megan's strategy allowed them to prevent $64,000 in interest on that mortgage. Watch what happens when we apply another $20,000 lump sum in month 11 after they've paid off the first lump sum, and now they've saved over $111,000. As you can see, they've also eliminated nearly 8 years from their mortgage with these 2 simple steps. It makes you wonder why this wasn't taught in school, doesn't it? You might have been in your mortgage for 5 years now, or even just 1 year. It doesn't matter. These same techniques still apply. But wouldn't it be great if you could eliminate 100 or even 200 payments just like that? Finally, let's review the same example using the visual of your typical mortgage amortization schedule. The red displays the total interest and the gray displays the total principal that's covered by each payment over the 30-year loan term. As you can see at the beginning of a mortgage, most of your mortgage payment goes to interest. But what happens when we leverage our lump sum and paycheck parking strategies along with cash flow stacking to reduce the mortgage balance by $20,000 every 10 months? We end up advancing down the amortization schedule by approximately 4.5 years and save substantial amounts of interest, even if you sell your home early. This literally means that when Dan and Megan apply a $20,000 lump sum from their debt weapon, their next mortgage payment will cover the same amount of principal on their loan as it would have if Dan and Megan had been paying for 4.5 years into the loan. Yet it's only the second month. Then in month 11, when the debt weapon balance reaches 0, the Albrights repeat this strategy and apply another $20,000 lump sum and further advance down the amortization schedule, continuing to repeat the process throughout the existing term of their loan or until they sell. Watch the results if they were to pay until this mortgage was paid off. The original balance, producing a $283,000 plus interest cost over the course of 30 years, now becomes just $72,500 in total interest, which means that they were able to save themselves approximately $210,760 and avoid 257 payments. I encourage you to watch all of our video tutorials and schedule your one-on-one free coaching session with an expert. Plus, press the button below to complete our short feedback form and get your free Cashflow Cruncher tool. I'd like to personally thank you in advance for helping us improve this powerful education. Finally, If you appreciate the value of this information as much as we do, please help us by sharing this education with others and send them a link to this and other videos. Remember, cash flow plus education equals power. Thank you and make it a great day.